we bought in recently. 6 billion of liquidations in Bitcoin and 19 in crypto overall represent 60 basis points and 44 basis points respectively. So it's a little scary. I get it. And I'd love to talk to you a bit about kind of, I think, why it's scary. But I do think the context of the market sizing is important to consider.
For those holding XRP, XLM, and HBAR, this quiet moment isn't the end. It's the signal. The one that comes right before everything changes. Because here's the truth. The system is preparing for something massive, and these three digital assets, Ripple's XRP, Stellar's XLM, and Hedera's HBAR, sit right at the heart of it. We're talking about the kind of transformation that doesn't just change portfolios, it changes how money moves around the world. The kind that redefines who controls liquidity, how value is transferred, and what it means to be early. You see, most people only pay attention to what's trending: meme coins, celebrity endorsements, quick flips. But the real players, they're watching what's happening behind the curtain. The quiet partnerships, the silent testing phases, the infrastructure being built for the next wave of global finance. And that's where the if this happens comes in. Because this we're talking about, the moment that could make XRP, XLM, and HBAR go parabolic, isn't just another exchange listing or a short-term pump. It's something far bigger. The moment global financial institutions fully integrate blockchain for settlement and value transfer. Let me explain. For years, the world has relied on outdated systems. SWIFT, ACH, SEPA. Networks that were revolutionary decades ago but painfully slow now. Cross-border transactions that should take seconds still take days. Banks pay ridiculous intermediary fees just to move the same dollars that exist on spreadsheets. It's an old-world system pretending to be digital. But over the last few years, we've started to see the cracks widen. And through those cracks, a new infrastructure is emerging. ISO 20022 messaging, tokenized assets, real-time settlement, and at the center of that evolution, XRP, XLM, and HBAR. Here's why. XRP is already being tested for institutional-grade settlement by banks and payment providers across multiple continents. It's built to replace SWIFT's messaging and provide the liquidity bridge that old systems can't. XLM, on the other hand, is built for the people, for remittances, humanitarian aid, and financial inclusion. When countries like Ukraine start using Stellar's network for their digital currency pilots, you know the infrastructure isn't theoretical, it's happening. And HBAR? That's the dark horse. It's the enterprise-grade blockchain where institutions quietly build tokenization platforms, digital identity frameworks, and secure, real-world use cases, all verified by names like Google, IBM, and LG. These aren't meme projects. These are the rails for the future of finance. But still, the question remains, what's the if? What's the single event that flips the switch? Could be as simple as one of three things. A major central bank publicly confirming it's using Ripple or Stellar technology for its digital currency settlement. A U.S. regulatory green light finally clarifying XRP's legal status. Or a massive institutional migration into ISO 20022 compliant networks as the old payment rails phase out. Any of these would cause what I call a utility shockwave. A moment where suddenly the world realizes these assets aren't just speculative. They're necessary. And when utility hits liquidity, that's when prices stop creeping and start exploding. Now here's the part most people don't understand. Markets don't move because of news. They move because of timing. The infrastructure for this global shift is already built. The pilots have already happened. The partnerships are already signed. What we're waiting on is the public acknowledgement, the point where these private pilots become open global standards. Think of it like the early internet. In the 90s, people laughed at the idea of digital communication. Why send emails when you can just fax? They said. But once businesses realized how much faster and cheaper email was, there was no going back. That's exactly what's about to happen with cross-border payments and value exchange. The moment a few global players start settling using XRP or XLM, the others won't have a choice but to follow. And when they do, you'll see what exponential really looks like. So, if you've been feeling like the market's asleep, if you've been wondering whether these ISO coins have lost momentum, I'll tell you now, This is the part where conviction pays off. Because when this happens, when the shift from testing to full-scale adoption goes live, XRP, XLM, and HBAR won't just rise, they'll reprice entirely. And most retail investors won't even realize it until it's already too late. Those days when a tweet could send prices soaring are long gone. What moves this market now is infrastructure, adoption, and integration. And that's exactly what's unfolding for XRP, XLM, and HBAR quietly right under everyone's nose. Most investors miss it because they're looking at price charts instead of progress charts. They see red candles and assume a project is dead. But if you dig deeper, if you watch the corridors being opened, the systems being tested, and the networks being integrated, you'll see something very different. The blueprint of the next financial system already taking shape. And the biggest clue? Every single one of these projects, XRP, XLM, and HBAR, is building real-world utility that connects directly with banks, governments, and global institutions. Not hype, not speculation, real-world adoption. Let's start with XRP, because this is where the domino effect begins. While retail investors debate price predictions on Twitter, Ripple has been building something much bigger behind the scenes. A global liquidity network designed to move value across borders instantly and with near-zero cost. This isn't some fantasy. It's already in motion. Ripple has established partnerships in over 40 countries, connecting hundreds of financial institutions, from Asia and Africa to Europe and the Americas. Banks that once relied solely on SWIFT are now quietly experimenting with RippleNet and ODL, on-demand liquidity. Systems that use XRP to settle transactions in seconds instead of days. And here's the key. Most of this is happening in pilot programs and private corridors that don't make daily headlines. Think about it. When banks test new infrastructure, they don't announce it to Reddit or Twitter. They do it quietly under NDAs until the tech is proven. Then, one day, you wake up and realize the entire backbone of international payments has shifted to blockchain, and XRP is the asset that makes it possible. And with regulatory clarity inching closer in the US, the moment Ripple gets the green light to operate openly in its home market, that's when you'll see liquidity flood in. That's when the if this happens turns into now it's happening. Now, let's talk about Stellar, XLM. The quiet humanitarian powerhouse that's doing for remittances what Ripple is doing for institutional finance. Most people don't realize how deep Stellar's partnerships run. We're talking about MoneyGram, Circle, USDC, and even government-backed initiatives that use Stellar's blockchain to move aid, wages, and digital currency across borders in real time. When Ukraine began developing its digital hryvnia, Stellar was at the center of it. The Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation signed a deal with the Stellar Development Foundation to explore building their CBDC and national payment infrastructure on Stellar's network. That's not a random partnership. That's a government literally saying, "We trust your technology to help modernize our entire financial system." And here's what makes Stellar special. It's built for inclusion. It's not about whales or hedge funds. It's about people. Imagine a farmer in rural Kenya sending money to his son in London instantly, without losing half of it to remittance fees. That's what Stellar enables, real-world value, not speculation. And while the masses chase the next meme coin, Stellar is quietly building the payment rails for UN aid programs, microfinance institutions, and cross-border remittance providers. When the next wave of adoption hits, when governments start rolling out digital currencies and NGOs start using blockchain for aid, the network connecting them won't be built from scratch. It'll already exist, and it'll be called Stellar. Then there's Hedera, HBAR, the one that still flies under the radar, even though it's backed by some of the biggest names in tech. Most blockchains promise speed, security, and scalability, but few actually deliver all three. Hedera does, and that's why companies like Google, IBM, LG, Standard Bank, and even the London School of Economics sit on its governing council. Hedera isn't chasing meme culture. It's quietly digitizing the infrastructure of trust. You've got companies using Hedera for tokenizing carbon credits, tracking supply chains, verifying digital identities, and even automating financial reporting. Every one of those use cases is massive, not just for crypto, but for the future of enterprise technology. We're talking about industries worth trillions of dollars slowly shifting onto distributed ledgers that use HBAR for transaction validation and security. And here's the craziest part. Most HBAR holders have no idea this level of adoption is already underway. That's why 90% of them will miss the real parabolic move when it comes. Because while they're waiting for hype, institutions are already building quietly. And once these systems go live publicly, BAR's value won't reflect speculation. It'll reflect necessity. Now here's where all three XRP, XLM, and HBAR start to converge. Every major financial institution and government talking about interoperability, tokenization, or digital currency infrastructure is basically describing what these networks already do. We've reached a point where these technologies are no longer futuristic ideas. They're requirements for the next phase of the financial system. And the ISO 20022 migration is the clearest sign of that shift. Over 11,000 financial institutions worldwide are now being pushed toward a new messaging standard that enables data-rich, blockchain-compatible transactions. And guess which digital assets are already aligned with it? XRP, XLM. And yes, HBAR is being integrated through enterprise frameworks that plug directly into ISO rails. When this global standard goes fully live, these assets will no longer sit outside the system. They'll become part of it. That's the real catalyst. That's the if moment the market keeps underestimating. Because when this transition from legacy to blockchain-native settlement officially flips on, when regulators, banks, and enterprises all converge on one infrastructure standard, that's when XRP, XLM, and HBAR won't just move, they'll go parabolic. If you've been paying attention, you know something big is brewing, you can feel it. But while everyone's distracted by daily price swings, those who actually study the structure of this market are starting to notice the signs. And these signs aren't coming from influencers or Twitter threads. They're coming from the world's biggest institutions, central banks, and private networks that quietly dictate how global money moves. These are the hidden indicators that tell us XRP, XLM, and HBAR are getting closer to their parabolic moment. When you talk about liquidity corridors, most people think it's a buzzword, but it's the single most important part of global adoption. Think of it like this: before the internet connected people, there had to be infrastructure, servers, cables, satellites. For blockchain-based finance, that infrastructure is being built right now, and it's powered by interoperable ledgers like XRP, XLM, and HBAR. Ripple's on-demand liquidity, ODL, is quietly being integrated into corridors across Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. Just this year, multiple regional banks began using Ripple's network to settle cross-border payments in seconds, not in days. These aren't just fintech startups. We're talking about licensed financial institutions, clearing billions in transactions each quarter. And the key? Many of these settlements are using XRP as the bridge asset. When you have global corridors flowing value through one asset, that's when true price discovery begins. Now pair that with Stellar's remittance corridors through MoneyGram and USDC, and you start to see the web forming. Remittances, aid, and retail payments all running on the same interoperable backbone. Meanwhile, Hedera is building the enterprise layer, enabling stablecoin issuance, tokenized assets, and digital identities that plug into the same global ecosystem. This is what mass adoption looks like before it's visible. Here's another signal: the rise of tokenization. You've probably heard that word thrown around, but few grasp its magnitude. When financial assets like bonds, real estate, or even carbon credits become tokenized, they need an underlying network that's fast, secure, and compliant. That's where HBAR and XRP Ledger come in. Ripple recently expanded into tokenizing real-world assets for institutions, enabling instant settlement and fractional ownership. Hedera, meanwhile, has become the go-to platform for enterprises to digitize and track high-value assets. One project, for example, is using Hedera to tokenize carbon credits for governments and corporations, making climate data transparent and verifiable. And on Stellar, we've seen tokenized fiat currencies and digital stablecoins being used for humanitarian relief. Each of these examples adds liquidity, utility, and credibility to these networks. And when you have institutional-grade utility flowing through a public ledger, it's only a matter of time before value follows. That's how you move from speculation to real adoption. Now here's where it gets even bigger. We're at the stage where central banks, not just commercial banks, are testing blockchain infrastructure for national currencies. And while headlines keep mentioning digital dollar or digital euro, what's often not mentioned is that many of these pilots are being built on or inspired by networks like Ripple and Stellar. We already know Stellar has direct involvement with Ukraine's CBDC pilot. And Ripple has been working with multiple central banks in Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe on similar projects. These governments aren't just experimenting for fun. They're modernizing their settlement systems for the digital age. And when they move from testing to live production, they'll need a liquidity bridge that can handle instant cross-border settlements. Guess which assets fit that requirement perfectly? XRP and XLM. At the same time, Hedera is carving out its role in government and institutional data management, providing the trust and security needed for these systems to operate transparently. All of this ties together. And when the switch flips, when even one or two major countries announce CBDCs operating on these rails, the rest of the world will rush to catch up. That's the inflection point. The final signal, and maybe the most important, is regulation. For years, the biggest obstacle holding back XRP, XLM, and HBAR from mainstream adoption has been uncertainty. No institution wants to build on something the SEC might later call a security. But now, we're seeing momentum. Court decisions, global frameworks, and cross-border regulations are beginning to take shape. Countries like the UK, Singapore, and Japan are already creating clear legal definitions for digital assets. And with the US election season approaching, pressure is mounting for clarity at home. Once that clarity hits, once XRP and similar assets are recognized as utility-based payment tokens, the floodgates open. That's when the wait-and-see institutions jump in. And when institutional liquidity enters a network designed for global settlement, parabolic moves are no longer just speculation. They're inevitable. We're watching all the signs come together: liquidity corridors, tokenization, CBDC pilots, and regulation. And when they align, the world won't be ready for what happens next. Because the truth is, we've never had assets positioned like XRP, XLM, and HBAR before. They're not built for hype. They're built for the system itself. And when the system finally moves, these will be the first to move with it. Let's be real, the crypto market always feels unpredictable. One week, everyone's screaming bull run, and the next, it's crypto is dead again. But every few years, something much bigger brews underneath. Something that doesn't rely on retail hype, influencer tweets, or speculative pumps. And that's exactly where XRP, XLM, and HBAR sit right now. The truth? We are standing on the edge of a monetary transformation, one that'll make today's market cycles look like warm-ups. While everyone's waiting for another meme coin explosion, the infrastructure of the future is being quietly built on the backs of these three networks. Let's put this into perspective. If global settlement systems go blockchain native, XRP becomes the bridge. If CBDCs roll out internationally, Stellar becomes the backbone for global inclusion. If enterprises tokenize assets at scale, Hedera becomes the secure layer for that digital trust. And the keyword across all three, if. But here's the thing, the if is already turning into when. You can see it in the slow rollout of ISO 20022 standards. You can see it in the partnerships being inked quietly, Ripple with financial institutions, Stellar with government-backed pilots, Hedera with global enterprises. You can see it in the growing regulatory acceptance around the world. These aren't coincidences. These are the signs that we are right before the switch flips. The thing most retail investors get wrong is timing. They look for emotion instead of evidence. They sell too early because they don't see movement, not realizing that during consolidation, the institutions are building the runway for the takeoff. That's where we are now. And when the jets finally ignite, when XRP starts bridging real liquidity, when Stellar's remittance and CBDC rails go live, when Hedera's tokenization networks expand into mainstream finance, the explosion won't be gradual. It'll be sudden, violent, parabolic. This is why conviction matters. Because when the crowd wakes up, it'll be too late to get in cheap. So if you're holding XRP, XLM, or HBAR, stay alert. Watch the infrastructure, not the influencers. And remember, history doesn't reward those who guess the future. It rewards those who prepare for it. If this breakdown hit home, If you believe we're standing right before the next great financial reset, hit that like button and drop a comment with your thoughts on which project you think leads the charge, XRP, XLM, or HBAR. Because in the coming months, we're going to see reality catch up with preparation. And when it does, those who stayed focused will be the ones celebrating at the top. Subscribe now for more deep dives on real-world utility, global finance, and ISO 20022 coins, because this next phase is not about speculation. It's about survival and positioning yourself before the explosion.